Hello everyone and welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero, your AI host. If you're new to the channel, we're doing a cash giveaway all through the month of September. Free $100 cash monies every video, with the grand prize being your choice of either $500 or becoming my next acolyte, which is pretty much unlimited coaching for a certain period of time, valued at over $1,500. Stick around to the end of the video to find out the details. Morale might be a little down right now after a few of the recent videos I've released. How about we pick things up with our biggest win for the month of August? I don't want to ruin any surprises, but let's say we receive a visit from a certain scaly lizard this session, and it's for a pretty massive win. This session takes place on August 31st. We begin our night at 1:02 in the morning. As usual, we're playing the 2-5 no limit hold'em at the Win Encore in Las Vegas, where we buy in for $1,500, which is 300 big blinds. The first table I sit down at has 3 other pros/good players. After 30 minutes of that nonsense, I table change to another table, where I only have to contend with Donald as the only other recognizable pro. It may be a short 6-handed table, but it's worth not having to fight other pros for a bite to eat. 10 minutes after being on this table, under the gun limps. I open to 20 on the button with pocket 9s. My camera was actually malfunctioning, so let's just pretend this is the hand we're staring at. Big blind makes the call, as well as the under the gun limper. The flop comes 10, 9, 2, with 2 spades and 1 heart. We flop middle set on a pretty coordinated board. The big blind checks, but the under the gun leads for 30 into the pot of 60 with a stack of about 1,400. We're not having any of that nonsense. There are too many different straight draws on this board, as well as the obvious flush draw. We are in position though, so we don't have to raise too big. I pump the action up to 75. The big blind folds, but the under the gun calls. The turn is a 7 of hearts, putting 2 hearts on board. 8 jack makes the obvious straight. Under the gun leads again for another bet of 50. If he actually has the straight, we still have outs. Otherwise, I recognize a weak bet when I see one. Slow playing is for chumps. When you play in a deep stack game, you always want to try to get as much money into the middle as possible if you think you have the lead. I bump the action once again to 200. Under the gun makes the call once again. The river is the last remaining 9. Quadzilla pays us a visit for the very first notable hand we play. I go for 5 months without getting a visit from my good friend here, but this past month, I keep seeing him all the time. He's probably hungry after 5 months of hibernation, so when my opponent checks it over to me, I throw out a massive bet of 625, which I would do if I missed a huge combo draw with a hand like Jack Queen of Spades. My opponent thinks about it for a moment before making the call. I introduce him to Quadzilla. Shockingly, he tables pocket aces. He played the hand completely weird, but it actually saved him his last $500. If he had limp raised pre-flop or just come out raising, I would have gone after his whole stack. 20 minutes later, I'm the one with pocket aces this time. Short stack opens under the gun for 20 with only 65 behind. +1 makes the call, who recently lost to the quads in my last hand. I 3-bet to 100 on the button. Surprisingly, everyone including the short stack folds, but the +1 calls with a stack of about 800. The flop comes 9, 10, 5 with 2 spades. This looks a whole lot like the last battleground we fought on. Suddenly, my opponent comes out betting full pot, launching a massive attack for $200. The board is all kinds of wet. He's too short stacked for me to worry about playing it safe against a set, so I just stick it all in for his last remaining 500. He says it's his last hand, shows 5-6 of clubs, and says he's going to choose to walk away with his remaining chips. Since he's leaving, I show him that he made the right choice. Literally 2 hands later, we're down to 5-handed. I open to 25 under the gun with pocket kings, my least favorite premium hand. Targeting the short stack guy in the small blind with $65. Everyone folds to the small blind, who takes the bait and shoves it all in. The big blind folds, so I make the easy call. My opponent tables ace-3 offsuit, and I table my red royalty. The board runs out to a 4-spade board, but thankfully my opponent isn't carrying one, so I pocket the small win. Up $1,282 barely an hour and 5 minutes into the session. Do you see why I table change so often now? Get off tables with too many pros and elite players to find the ones with unrecognizable faces or ones with known loose players. With this win, the table breaks, so we get moved to a new table yet again. Shortly after moving to the new table, I'm holding ace-jack of spades in the small blind. The middle position limps, and the action gets folded over to me. I open to 30, charging more since I'm out of position. The big blind gets out of the way, but the limper calls. The flop comes 7, 6, 7 with 2 spades. This is a better than average flop. We flop 2 overs with the nut flush draw. We're drawing almost dead to pocket 6s or 7-6 suited though. I start with a c-bet of 40. My opponent calls. The turn is a 10 of clubs, which I'm not a huge fan of. We're now drawing pretty badly against 8-9, which makes the obvious straight. So the best course of action here is to check. Thankfully, the action checks around. The river is a jack of diamonds, hitting one of our overcards. If we were drawing live, this is a great card. I go for some value and bet out $60. My opponent folds, but you should never complain about winning $75 in just a couple of minutes. For this next hand, there's a live 10. I'm in the small blind with king 6 of diamonds. The hijack and cutoff both limp. The button opens for 30 with 600 behind. This is an extremely weak open, especially with 2 people already limping. I have no intention of calling here. King 6 out of position is absolute garbage, even if it's suited. I put in a 3-bet to 150. Everyone quickly gets out of the way. I did this for a few reasons. 1, there's $60 of dead money that's incredibly easy to pick up. I recognized how weak the opening raise was. 2, I showed that I squeezed with a random 6 of diamonds. I tell people never to show their hands unless they're forced to, or unless it's for a purpose. Here, it's for advertising. I actually don't pull moves like this very often. It's not very equitable long term just for the dead money. The advertising, however, that's priceless. This will come into play later this session. 2 hands later, the hijack whom I've just bluffed opens for 20. I call on the button with ace-jack offsuit. Everyone else folds. The flop comes 9, 6, 7, rainbow. My opponent checks. I don't have diddly squat. I do have position though. I throw out a bet of 25. He makes the call. The turn is another 9. He checks again. This is a great card. Even if my opponent floated the flop with a better hand like a small pocket pair or a bigger ace, he's going to have a really hard time with this card. I put out another bet of 75, which is about the same size I would choose if I had a hand like 8-9 suited, 9-10 suited, or even a boat. He quickly makes the fold. This is the power of position. For this next hand, under the gun limps. It's our same adversary from the last 2 hands. I open to 20 with king 10 of diamonds in the hijack. The big blind and limper make the call. The flop comes 4, 3, 8, rainbow with 1 diamond. We have nothing except 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw. When both opponents check the action over, however, I assess that this is an extremely dry board. I think that the vast majority of holdings will have to fold to a strong bet here. I decide on a much heavier than usual bet of 45 into the pot of 60. The big blind folds, but our nemesis in the under the gun position calls. He either has a set or some combination of an 8. The turn is a 9 of spades, not helping us whatsoever. When my opponent checks, I check the action back. A 9 is not a very good card for us to continue bluffing on. It's too connected to the 8. He could easily have made 2 pairs. The river is a 10 of clubs, which at first is a great looking card. We make top pair with a very strong kicker. However, when my opponent throws out an overbet of 175, there's not a lot he could have here. The only hand I'm beating is 5-6 suited for a missed straight draw. What's more likely is that my opponent has either 2 pairs or a set. I make what I've heard Mark Goon of Hungry Horse Poker call a disrespectful fold. I'm saying that my opponent doesn't have it within him to bluff in the spot. He likely feels he lost value when the turn got checked around, so is trying to make up for it with a massive bet on the river. No thanks, I don't feel like getting owned today. For this next hand, I get dealt the Rockets again. The Rambo of solo warfare. The hijack opens for 20 with a stack of about 700. He's the same opponent we've been battling for the last 3 previous hands. I 3-bet to 80 on the button. Everyone else folds back to him. I swear, it's almost like we're playing heads up on this table. He's had enough of my shenanigans. He 4-bets me to 200. Oh my goodness, music to my ears. If he were any deeper, I would just smooth call here. A 5-bet is almost always certainly aces. However, he's only got 500 behind. Surely he must feel pot committed with whatever he's holding, right? I just stick in the 5-bet for his remaining chips. Oddly, he tanks. I was expecting a snap call. Wow, he must have a real junkard. After about 40 seconds, he decides to make the call. I table my aces. The board runs out Jack 6 6 with a 6 of clubs on the turn and a Jack of clubs on the river. My opponent shows he called me with Ace 7 of spades. This is what happens when you nudge someone over and over. They eventually fly off the deep end. This, my friends, is exactly why I showed that 6 of diamonds earlier when I squeezed the pot. My opponent must have assumed I was on the button and was 3-betting light here. 15 minutes later, the middle position limps. The low jack opens for 30, which I recognize is a larger than normal open. He's over 3k deep, so it's an easy call for me with pocket 5s in the small blind. Suddenly, the big blind 3-bets to 100 with barely 400 in his stack. The limper folds, but the low jack makes the call. I contemplate on what to do. Had the low jack not called, this would have been an easy fold. I'm not playing out of position against a short stack, and his raise amount doesn't justify set mining. However, the low jack, on the other hand, is super deep. I think his most likely hands are either jacks or queens, taking into consideration how big his open was. He's probably just waiting for a non-ace or king flop to take out the short stack. If I get an insanely small flop that also hits my set, I might be able to hit him up for a pretty considerable amount here. I put in the call. The flop is more beautiful than I could have imagined. It's deuce, 5, deuce with 2 clubs. This is just too good. Both of my opponents most likely have an overpair on a 5-high board. I start with a check. The big blind goes all in for his remaining $293. As anticipated, the low jack makes the call. I was actually hoping he would raise to get me out of the pot. Okay, I have a couple of options here. As soon as I make this call, the pot will already be $1,200. There are a lot of cards that could kill the action, including any club, any ace, any king. If I were in position, this would just be a call without a doubt. However, since I'm first to act, I think I could lose a lot of value to several different turn cards. My opponent could put me on an ace-high flush draw and wheel draw, meaning any 3 or 4 could kill the action as well. We know he undoubtedly has a huge overpair, and not many people are capable of folding overpairs, especially on a flop this low. I decide to put in a small raise so that I can get a full double up by the river. I don't think jacks or queens can fold on a flop this low, especially when one of the low cards is already paired. I check raise to $800, which is only a $500 raise into a pot that's already $1,200. After 40 seconds of tanking, somehow, some way, the low jack evades my knockout blow like a freaking ninja going into stealth. He says he's folding queens. What the freak? That was an insanely good fold in a 2-5 game. I didn't think he was capable of it. Had I known, I obviously would have just called, but 90% of random players aren't capable of making that fold. The turn brings in a 4 of hearts, and the river brings in the ace of hearts. The big blind shows pocket kings. So we take down a really nice sized pot, which was sadly not as much as we were hoping, but still worth the $70 set mine, getting just slightly over 10-1 on our money. 25 minutes later, we're down to 5-handed. Under the gun opens for 20 with a $500 stack. He's the guy we just stacked with the pocket 5s. The middle position, our other opponent from the last hand, makes the call. I decide to get a little cheeky and 3-bet to 105 with ace-4 of hearts in the big blind. Both opponents call. Whoops, not ideal. We're forced to hit something now. The flop comes ace-7-3 with 2 diamonds and 1 spade. The under the gun short stack is more likely to be carrying an ace. The middle position has proven to be too tight. He most likely has a pocket pair of some kind. This flop is almost as good as it gets for our hand. We start with a check to see what the others do. Thankfully, the action gets checked around. Fantastic! If under the gun had jammed, I would have just folded even after smashing the ace. The turn is a 2 of spades, putting 2 spades on board to go along with the 2 diamonds. This is a much welcome sight. We now also have a gut shot draw to go with our hand. Both opponents have shown the strength of their hands, so there's no point in giving them any more free cards. I lead for a strong bet of 200. They both fold, and I show my random 4 of hearts. Me showing a free card like this makes it more difficult for my opponents to ever play against me in the future. They'll know they can never accurately put me on a hand. I didn't like that Mr. Pocket Queens over there was able to properly fold his hand earlier, so I want to throw him off his game. For this next hand, I open to 15 under the gun with ace-4 again, but the spades variety this time. Only the +1 calls. Same short stack for opponent from the last 2 hands. The flop comes 3, 5, 10 with 2 spades. Oh gosh, this is a gorgeous flop. We're mathematically ahead of even pocket kings here. I lead with a strong bet of 25 into the pot of 35. My opponent makes the call. The turn is a damning 6 of spades. We make the nuts. I put in a misleading down bet to 20. My opponent takes the bait and pumps the action up to 100. He barely has another 100 behind, so there's no point in posturing. I just stick it in for his last remaining chips. He makes the call, stating that he has a 10, which is a complete dead draw to our hand. The river brings in a board pairing 3 of hearts, which has no relevance in this case. We knock out another opponent and the table breaks. I'm at just over 3 hours, and I'm happy with how much I've made tonight, closing out my month of August, so I decide to rack up. In for 1500 and out for 49.43 for an insane win of 34.43 after only 3 hours and 4 minutes of playtime. This session is likely the second best hourly I've made this year in a single session, losing only to the monumental win back in the beginning of March when I scored a win of over 5,800 playing 2-5. The cash giveaway for this video requires that you be a subscriber to this channel, like this video, comment below about anything you like from this video or the channel in general, then pick a number between 60 to 800. As usual, the winner will be announced in the next video. Thank you everyone who participated in the last cash giveaway. Dun dun dun. The moment of truth. And we have a winner, folks. Congratulations to Steve Lau for winning our 3rd cash drawing. Reach out to me to claim your prize. My email and Instagram is available in every video. As always, I hope to see everyone in the next video.